Hey everyone, it's the first few days of 2023, and we'll be briefly talking about the impact of redistricting on last year's election for 2022. In the 2022 midterm election, we can clearly see the impact of redistricting. As a result of gerrymandering alongside redistricting, many of these states diluted the vote and made it easier for their political party to win a majority for the House of Representatives. And what redistricting is that every 10 years, the US Census would remeasure the population across the country and allocate the House of Representative or electoral college seats to these states based off these population. The states would then gain the power to draw their own district lines in the process, where they sometimes would just cram everyone of one political party into one district or dilute their vote so that their votes ultimately would not matter. This honestly happens in both political party, and it's a super corrupted system. Independent commissions would always do a much better job representing the people than this. In this year's election, that honestly could have made a difference between Democrats or Republicans winning the majority of the House. If we look at 538's prediction on this, the original 2022 partisan leaning would feature 230 districts, more Republican than the national average, with 205 seats, more Democrats than the national average. And that means in a perfect vacuum, the Republicans would always win the House of Representative majority and win control of the legislature. Now, let's take a look at how close the overall House of Representative race was in 2022. Looking at the general election, we can see that Republicans only gained an overall of 10 seats in comparison to the 2020 election, and the Democrats only realistically needed 5 more seats for their majority. This margin was depressingly low for the Republicans, who predicted that there will be a red wave, and instead, what we see was little blue dots all across America. So, taking into account that these handful of seats may determine the control of the House, these redistricting may have actually cost the Democrats majority for the House of Representatives. In 3 of these states, Ohio, Alabama, and North Carolina, they are being sued or have already been sued because they've purposely diluted the votes or didn't provide enough racial majority districts. And we'll be looking at these states individually. First off, Ohio. When we look at each of these districts, we can see that the Republicans have overwhelmingly won by 10, 15, or even 20 points in some of these seats. And these are the election under the gerrymander map of Ohio. And we may see a shift to the left after the redistricting process occurs again. Since the Ohio Supreme Court has previously ruled this map to be unconstitutional, redistricting will be inevitable. The Princeton Gerrymandering Project gave them a grade for F for being overwhelmingly beneficial for the Republicans. And here on this chart, we can see that the overall seats that Democrats should typically win would be approximately 6 to 7 and maybe even 8. But the current map gives them a total of 5 seats that they would win in normal circumstances. And when we compare this to the actual general election, this is precisely how many seats to Ohio Democrats have actually won. So when the seats are redrawn and most likely shift to the left, we may see the Democrats gain 1, 2, or 3 seats from the state alone. And keeping in mind that the Republicans only won by approximately 5 votes or 5 seats. So that means in the best case scenario, this will tilt the balance in favor of the Democrats to 214 seats or 216 seats against 221 seats and 219 seats for the Republicans. And it's a similar case here in North Carolina, where the redistricting plans made by the Republican state legislature is now heavily contested. Mathematicians and electoral researchers have testified that these lines drawn by the Republican Party are more likely to give North Carolina 10 of the 14 House seats. And we can see this in the actual House of Representatives map, where although they did win by 7 Democrat seats, it was really within a few margin of error, and anything could have changed the outcome. The redistricting process will shift some of these seats to the left and make it a lot more competitive. We should also keep in mind that although these seats currently in the Democrats' control may also shift rightward as well. So we wouldn't necessarily know who won. What we see here in the Princeton Gerrymandering Project is that Even as fairness in by their metric is decent in the B range, it is extremely uncompetitive. After the redistricting process occur, we can expect to see some of these seats shift to the left and be more competitive. This will allow Democrats or Republicans to pick up these very competitive seats, and maybe even swing in favor of the Democrats to 217 seats or 218 seats in the general election. Lastly, Alabama. The 2021 redistricting plan is also contested in the Supreme Court case Merrill v. Milligan. It is found that there are sufficient black population in the state to make up a second majority black district, and they are currently suing the Voting Rights Act under this. And this means that if the case were actually heard by the Supreme Court, and if deemed lawful, then another seat will be made with a black majority, which is a demographic that typically breaks for the Democrats by more than 80%. This case seems to be more up to the wind for the justice to decide, and I do not personally know how they would personally decide this. But they did say that they will decide on this case in 2023, and its impact could be monumental and possibly create another Democrat-leaning district. And overall, it's important to know that although these redistricting may shift some of these seats to the left, it still will become competitive seats but for the Democrats in the best case scenario. These seats still won by 10 to 20 points in the majority of these districts, and redistricting may even shift some of these seats to the left or even to the right, for example, in Ohio, where some of these seats may shift to the right and become a competitive seats. So, looking at how redistricting might work in these states, it's safe to say that they did cause an impact on the overall House of Representative control. It's also important to remember that Democrat states also participate in gerrymandering as well. But these states from Republican held states are the ones going to trial. More people voted for Republicans in 2022. So even if these states have fixed their map, Democrats winning control of the House will be another product of gerrymandering as well. But in these areas, but if these areas were actually redrawn, Democrats could have very well won a majority of 219 seats or 218 seats to regain the House of Representative majority. Regardless, if the Biden administration maintained their current popularity, redistricting may be the difference between Democrats or Republicans winning the House in 2024.